Most every backyard gardener that I'm aware of understands the importance of soil and bringing the soil to life, whereas most conventional farmers don't really care. What's going on, gardeners? Today's video is going to be awesome. It's something that I get very fired up about, something that I'm very passionate about. So stick around for the whole thing. It's going to be lots of information. I hope you stick around and we can talk this problem out together. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so about a week ago, a friend of mine that knows this topic really gets me fired up and is something I'm really passionate about. He sent me a screenshot of an article, and the title of the study was titled something like "Homegrown Food Emits 6 times the amount or leaves 6 times the amount of a carbon footprint than conventional grown food like conventional farming." I saw this and my mind exploded, my head exploded, because I couldn't believe that this was an article that came from a study. I'm gonna link the study down below, you can check it out, but this is what gets me fired up. Headlines like this that are discouraging backyard gardeners, people that want to be self-sufficient and grow their own food. And we have these big lies that are being told, and I don't know where they're coming from. And by the way, this video is not political at all, but they tell these big lies that try to discourage us who are just trying to grow our own food in our own backyard. And that really upsets me. And honestly, this is the whole reason I have this YouTube channel, is because I want to encourage more people to grow food in their backyard, to grow plants, because there are so many benefits. So when I see headlines like this, it really fires me up, and that's why I'm coming to you with this video. So what we're going to do is, I'm not going to go into detail on the actual study. Like I said, I'm linking it below, you can check it out. But first, I'm going to tell you why I believe this is false. And again, if you're smarter than me and I say something incorrect scientifically, drop it down below, let me know. But I'm going to tell you why this is incorrect, and I'm going to tell you why homegrown food, backyard gardeners actually leave less of a carbon footprint than conventional farming. And then after that, I am just going to go over a few details as to why it's better overall in general for the environment. We're not just talking about carbon sequestration. I can't say that word today. So buckle up, let's go. Let's go down the list. The first one is, well, with most backyard gardeners, people who are growing food or plants in their own backyard, they almost always have something growing in the ground. Doesn't matter if it's summer, fall, winter, spring, doesn't matter if we're between crops, there is almost always something growing in our ground. Compare that to conventional farming, where there are very long periods of time where there is nothing growing in the ground between crops. The ground is just sitting there, it's just bare dirt that's exposed to all the elements. Why does this matter? We're going to get into more detail later on, but essentially, carbon in the air is bad, carbon in the ground is good. How does carbon get into the ground? Well, it gets into the ground through a process called photosynthesis, which happens with plants, which can only happen if there are plants in the ground doing that process over and over again. So those long extended periods of time where conventional farming has nothing growing in the ground, that is not good in terms of carbon sequestration and pulling that carbon from the air into the ground. Now I'm going to link a documentary down below from Netflix. Hopefully most of you have seen it. It's called Kiss the Ground. If you watch it about halfway through, they show this map which measures the amount of CO2 in the air. During the tilling process, which tilling is not good, it's disturbing the ground, we'll talk about that later, but during the tilling process in April or so, there is tons of CO2 in the air, right? The map just shows tons of these red pockets everywhere. Red indicates more CO2. Go watch the documentary, you'll see what I'm talking about. But that is because they are tilling, which is releasing all of that carbon from the ground where it's good into the air where it's bad. But then when they get until about mid-June, when everything is growing, all the farmers' crops are growing, there's essentially no carbon in the air, very little traces of carbon in the air. And that's because all the plants are growing, there's no bare dirt, they are pulling that from the air into the ground. So that's reason number one, most backyard gardeners always have something growing in their yard, there's no bare dirt, and that process of photosynthesis is occurring all the time. All right, and the second reason is reduced transportation emissions. All right, with conventional farming, they are generally growing these crops a state or two away. They have big machines that have to go out and harvest all these crops. Then they put them into a big truck and then ship that truck and then another truck, and then they go to a grocery store and then you have to drive there and get them. So there's a lot more that has to happen in terms of emissions in order to get that food to you. Whereas in your backyard garden, there's no transportation emissions that are being let out into the atmosphere, right? You just walk out 10 feet into your backyard and cut your own head of broccoli and you're good to go. And the next reason is organic matter recycling. Organic matter recycling happens in backyard gardens. It does not happen in conventional farming. What does this mean? Organic material is all this stuff, like all this bamboo back here that falls to the ground that I don't rake up and throw away and put in the garbage can, and then the dump truck takes it to the landfill where those methane gases are released into the air, right? That's what happens in conventional farming. They essentially try to always leave underneath the crops all the ground barren. They're not mulching with organic matter. You know that it's very important to mulch with organic matter in your backyard garden. That's how you get free fertilizer. Remember, we're always feeding the soil. We're not feeding the trees, and we'll get into this later, but where in conventional farming, they are always just feeding the trees or the crops with synthetic fertilizer, whereas in most backyard gardens, they are taking that organic matter, they're returning it to the ground where it decomposes, breaks down, and feeds the soil. Again, in comparison to going to the landfill where it's not going to break down organically and it's going to release those methane emissions into the atmosphere. And the next reason is energy efficient practices. Let's just take one example here. Let's talk about watering. Think about watering conventional farms, how difficult it is and how much water you have to use to water all of these crops. In addition to that, a lot of these farms are pulling groundwater, which is depleting our groundwater tables underneath the ground. That's not good. That's not talking about carbon, but that's just overall for the environment. Whereas with backyard gardeners, as you've seen, I have another video where I harvest rainwater, right? And so I'm not taking any additional resources. I'm harvesting my own rainwater, and I am actually putting it into my ground, which is going underground, which is actually helping the groundwater tables versus conventional farming, which is depleting them. That's a huge difference. Something that conventional farming does not do, but backyard gardening does. The next reason, and it's a big reason, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. I talk about it all the time. I even have a video about it, but it's the heat island effect. What that is essentially, think about concrete jungles. If you live in a big city, like I live in the Phoenix, suburb of Phoenix, concrete everywhere. Okay, what happens when there's concrete everywhere? Everybody has their houses that they're cooling down with air conditioning during the summer. We know sometimes that it doesn't get below 100 degrees at night in the summer. Those air conditioners are running 24/7. And guess what? It's releasing into the atmosphere that is not good for the atmosphere. Guess what helps your air conditioners not run as much and helps reduce the effect of the heat island? Well, more plants, for a number of different reasons. We'll talk about some of them later on, especially when it comes to rainfall in your area. But by planting many things in your yard, you are reducing the heat island effect. That is a huge difference that many people don't understand, how big of an effect it has on our environment and rainfall totals altogether. And then the last reason, when we're talking about carbon footprints, and then we're going to go into just generally why backyard gardening has less of a carbon footprint than conventional farming. But the last one is, and I've mentioned it a few times, is carbon sequestration, right? That again is the process from taking carbon out of the air and putting it into the ground. Backyard gardens are so much more efficient at doing that because, again, typically there's more growing. You always have a cover crop growing, whereas with traditional farming, you see tilling, which is not good because, again, it's destroying the soil life, and on top of that, it's emitting all of that carbon back into the air when it was trapped under the ground. And they're doing that process. They're constantly tilling, right? They're constantly leaving their soil bare year after year, multiple times each year. Whereas backyard gardeners, no, most of the time they're never tilling. They're putting down organic material. More things are growing. There is more carbon sequestration that is happening in backyard gardens, whereas it's not happening with conventional farming. All right, so now let's take all of that and just kind of talk about in general why backyard gardening is so much better for the environment than conventional farming. And I hope you're sticking around with me. And also, by the way, you probably know this by now. I'm not a scientist. I'm not very smart. I'm just kind of going off of what I've seen firsthand in my garden and the little bit of research I've done. If you have better information than me, either to support what I'm saying or to tell me, dude, you don't know what you're talking about, post them down below. I don't get offended. My whole goal with all of this is just to help heal the earth while also healing ourselves, because that's what gardening and being in your yard does. So let's keep going. This is a huge one. This is one that I don't think many people understand the significance of it. And it goes into everything we were just talking about above and everything we're going to talk about below. Desertification. Desertification, that's just a fancy word for saying we are turning land from normal land, healthy soil into deserts. Deserts that have barren soil, that don't even have soil. It's just dirt. It's devoid of all life. It's just dead, right? We are, and there's numbers, I've seen high numbers, I've seen low numbers. I'm not going to throw any numbers out because I can't be sure, but we are turning miles and miles and miles, square miles of our land into desert all across the world in significant amounts every day, every week, every year, right? It's just more and more is turning from fertile soil that can help heal the earth, that can help grow things, that can reduce carbon in the air. We are killing the land so it no longer has the ability to do that. A lot of that is happening because of conventional farming. A lot of this is happening because conventional farming, again, is not feeding the soil. It is not helping keep the soil alive. We're doing things like no cover crops. We're doing things like tilling. We're doing things like using synthetic fertilizers that just completely kill all of the life in the soil. And that is not sustainable. And so that is why at an alarming rate, we are losing so much land to desertification. Soon, it's going to be something that is irreversible if we don't act now. Whereas backyard gardeners, they're not doing this, again, for all the reasons I listed below. We're mulching, we're throwing down organic material. We always have a crop going. We're not using synthetic fertilizers. We're using organic material that is building the life in the soil, that is building the ground back from dirt to soil, right? So we're actually healing the earth, whereas with conventional farming, it's actually doing the exact opposite. All right, so let's break this down even more and just talk about soil health in general. Every backyard gardener that I'm aware of understands the importance of soil and bringing the soil to life, whereas most conventional farmers don't really care. They just know they have to apply this much nitrogen or this much whatever each year to their crops to be able to have good crops. They're not worried about keeping the soil alive. They're just worried about what they have to do year to year to give the plants enough nutrients to be able to grow. That, again, is not a sustainable method. After a while, you can only throw so much synthetic crap down onto the earth before the earth says, no more, I'm done. We've seen that happen. We've seen it happen, actually, I mean, it's not just something that's happened recently, but we've seen it happen with other ancient civilizations where they've turned once fertile lands into nothing but barren desert. If we don't focus on the soil, which backyard gardeners do, conventional farmers for the most part don't, soon we won't be able to grow anything. And this leads us into our next talking point, which is erosion control and topsoil conservation. All right, we have seen erosion control be a huge problem here in the United States just recently. Let's talk about two examples. Let's go back, 80 years, in I think it was 1930, the Dust Bowl in the Midwest. Let's think about how that was created. That was created because of tilling and using synthetic fertilizers, which kills the soil. There was dust everywhere, right? I obviously wasn't alive, probably none of you were, but you can go back and see what happened. And now let's look even more recent, where we see these floods in the Midwest happen all of the time, right? There's no ground that can soak up all of this rainwater that they get in the Midwest, and that is because in many areas they've over-tilled the ground and they've used too much synthetic fertilizer. Dead ground, dirt, does not have the ability to absorb water and hold on to it. So what does it do? It's almost like cement, and it can absorb it. So that's why we get all of these huge floods in the Midwest. That is a direct correlation between poor agricultural practices, conventional farming, and again, tilling and using synthetic fertilizers on the ground. We are killing the ground, and that is killing our topsoil, and it is killing the ability of the ground to have any type of erosion control. All right, guys, we're working down the list. We're getting there. So the next point I want to talk about is pollinators, right? What is the difference? How is backyard gardening supporting pollinators, and why is that important versus conventional farming? Well, with conventional farming, we know that they are using pesticides. They are using tons of pesticides. They're using pesticides that they have to put gas masks on when they apply it. Does that make sense? They're putting that on our food, right? So it's not good for us. It's definitely not good for any living thing. It's a pesticide. It's meant to kill living things. Well, it doesn't just kill the bad things. It kills all of the good things. And by the way, if we just let it be, there are a lot more good things that will naturally kill the bad things if we just get out of the way and stop spraying all of these pesticides, right? So things like bees and other types of pollinators are being killed in massive amounts by conventional farming, whereas with backyard gardening, we're not using those types of things. You walk into most backyard gardens, you walk into my garden, you may see a hummingbird fly by, you're gonna see bees fly by, you're gonna see all types of insects and animals here, right? All of those things are 100% necessary if we want to continue to grow food on planet Earth. Without pollinators, we don't have a food supply. Without bees pollinating, we don't have a food supply. Backyard Gardner supports those pollinators. Conventional farming definitely does not. So why are we attacking backyard gardeners? Doesn't make sense. On top of that, and if you watch Kiss the Ground, they'll talk about this, 40% of our local rainwater comes from the small water cycle. In other words, 60% is coming from the oceans, right? But the other 40% is coming from the small water cycle, which is a local water cycle. We've talked about things like barren ground. We've talked about things like the heat island effect with concrete and asphalt, those emissions going into the air. We've talked about all of those things. Those things actually discourage rain. They're not going to bring as much rain into our area, and because of that, 40% of that water is being affected, and now that water is not falling on the ground. So now we're having to go and get even more groundwater, pump that up, deplete our groundwater tables, whereas with backyard gardening, we are actually saving water, conserving it, and planting more things, which encourages more rain to come and drop from the small water cycle. So backyard gardening actually encourages rain, whereas conventional farming discourages it. And I'm gonna finish up here with a few points, and these points are probably the most important. So I tell people all the time, I don't eat broccoli. I hate broccoli. I've never liked broccoli and cauliflower as well my whole life. But then I realized I actually hate broccoli and cauliflower and honestly any other vegetable that you buy at the store that comes from conventional farming. Once I grew it in my own yard and I tasted my own broccoli, I thought, oh my goodness, this is not even the same thing. This head of broccoli that I grew in my own yard versus this head of broccoli that I bought at the store, they're not even the same thing. Number one, they taste completely different. The stuff that you grow in your own backyard tastes wonderful, it tastes beautiful. You feel good when you eat it. From the store, not so good. On top of that, the one from your backyard is going to have so much more nutrition. Why is it going to have so much more nutrition than from conventional farming? Because conventional farming is growing that broccoli in dead soil. It is only getting its nutrients from a synthetic fertilizer, and it's getting covered in pesticides. I don't think those two things together are very good for you, right? And on top of that, it has Roundup all over it as well because they're killing weeds where the farmers grow their crops. At your home, in your backyard, you're using all these techniques we talked about. It's all organic. The broccoli is getting its nutrients from a soil that is alive. The way that it's been done since the earth has existed. It's gonna taste better, and it's also gonna be so much better for you. That's a huge reason. If that alone right there doesn't tell you that you should start growing in your own backyard and not believe the lies that, conventional farming is telling you, I don't know what to tell you. If that doesn't get you excited to grow your own food, then maybe gardening is not for you. But on top of that, also just the physical and the mental benefits that you get from being a backyard gardener. I cannot tell you how much peace and joy all of it that I get from being in my own backyard and growing my own food. And also, if you think about it, at the end of the day, that is the only skill that matters when everything goes to crap, when the apocalypse happens. It doesn't matter at that point how much money you have. It doesn't matter how good of a talker you are, to convince people or to give you this or to give you that. If you can't grow your own food when everything goes to crap and you're suddenly alone by yourself trying to survive, you're gonna die. That's the only thing that matters, is knowing how to care for the soil and to grow your own food. I don't know why there is this war against backyard gardeners and them trying to discourage us to not know how to do that. Because again, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. The whole point of this video is never look at any headlines like that and feel bad or feel discouraged or feel like you shouldn't be spending time, water, nutrients, fertilizer, that you shouldn't be doing all those things. All of those things are good things that you should be doing in your yard, and you should never feel bad about them, and you should fight out against things when you see headlines like this and push back and let others know, no, that's not right. Let's not focus on conventional farming. Let's focus more on backyard gardening, being self-sufficient, and growing healthy food to feed our bodies and our minds. I hope this video didn't bore too much of you. This is something that's very passionate to me. I know it can put a lot of you asleep, but watch the documentary Kiss the Ground. When you see articles like that, share videos like this, share links to Kiss the Ground, let people know backyard gardeners are here. We're here to stay. We're gonna grow stuff. We're gonna love it. We're not gonna go away. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video.